going to move on to a panel discussion that Deb Ritter is going to moderate, so we can hear from people who have actually been working with both the GREGoR Consortium and ClinGen. And Deb is an instructor at Baylor College of Medicine. She's one of the key people at the Baylor site that's part of ClinGen, and she is a program manager there, and she's also heavily involved in many things, particularly in the cancer expert panel space. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deb to introduce our panelists and moderate the session.
Great. All right. Thank you, Heidi. So we have invited some panelists that are in different career stages and involvement with GREGoR and/or ClinGen. So we have Amanda Kraus, Nicola Mulder, Frederick Kakimbo, and Zane Lombard joining us today. So we have asked each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves and describe their current work or and role or current activities with GREGoR and/or ClinGen. Then we have a little bit of time for questions following that, and then we have a question session that will take questions from all three of the presentations. So if we could go ahead, and I'll just call here to have Amanda introduce herself and say a bit about your work, and then I'll just go down the line there.
Hi, can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. And can you see me? No.
Can't see you. There you are. Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Well, so good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. So I'm Amanda Kraus. I'm the head of the Division of Human Genetics here in Johannesburg, South Africa. So I work for I have a joint appointment. I work for the National Health Laboratory Service, but I'm also part of the University of the Witwatersrand. So I have quite a sort of broad role in both service and research. I'm a medical geneticist, and I guess my involvement or my links to ClinGen perhaps came through being the clinical lead on an H3Africa project. So I'm working with Zane on the Developmental Disorders in Africa project, or the DDD Africa project, and we're really looking at trying to understand the genetic landscape of developmental disorders in Africa. I should also mention my other co-investigator, Ame Lumako, who's been very involved in setting up this workshop. So after a meeting or a workshop last year between ClinGen and H3Africa, I volunteered to join one of the ClinGen expert panels. And so now I'm on the ID autism gene curation panel. And I guess really just to convey my experience with that and to encourage people to join. So I think sort of being based in a very isolated place with relatively little support around us, it's been really fantastic to be part of an expert panel and to have discussions and to learn enormous amounts about sort of the approach to gene curation. Some really good discussions that we've had in those meetings, how you sort of assess mutation information, how you assess gene information, functional information, really, I think has been an amazing sort of positive experience. And certainly when I reflect on it, has increased my use and knowledge of ClinGen. So when we're doing the limited amount of diagnostic testing that we do, or some of the variant curation for our project, using ClinGen and sort of having a deeper understanding of the nature of the evidence in ClinGen has been really good. Yeah, I think that that's probably all I need to say for now. Maybe just the one thing that hasn't quite translated, but I would hope would translate, would be sort of building collaboration and links for our patients to get broader access to genomic testing and analysis. Thanks.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, and so we will have Nicola Mulder.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Nikki Mulder from the University of Cape Town. I had the computational biology division there, and I also had H3 Bionet, which is the Pan-African Bioinformatics Network that's part of H3Africa Consortium. So, and also run a few other data coordinating centers and will co-lead, for example, the Sickle Cell Data Coordinating Center. So our role in H3Africa is really managing all aspects of data. And so this is where I kind of first came across the kind of connection with ClinGen. Obviously, I'd seen ClinGen before. So we have the H3Africa archive, and this is a local store for H3Africa data as a kind of liaison with the EGA. Because the H3Africa data gets submitted to the European Genome Phenome Archive. And so we, one of our roles is to prepare the data for submission to public repositories, including EGA, ENA, and now ClinVar. And so one of the kind of analyses that we did as a consortium was to look at whole genome sequencing of a number of different groups in Africa. And that led to a Nature paper. And in that Nature paper, we obviously made several claims about the fact that some of the data some of the data in ClinGen is based on frequencies of populations that are unknown. And actually, there was a lot of data, missing data, because we're missing all the representation of different populations within Africa. And so together with ClinGen, we actually pulled out some of the data in that particular paper and looked at how we can submit that to ClinGen to improve the annotation. So for example, they helped us to pull out a spreadsheet of variants that are very low frequency in ClinGen and had been characterized as pathogenic, but then it turns out that actually they were seen in reasonably high, greater than 5% frequency in African populations. So it just showed how the data that we've been working on, and particularly this underrepresented group, could help to improve the annotations in ClinGen. So we don't. In that data set, we didn't specifically have clinical data associated or phenotype data. So it was really based on the frequency data. But H3Africa is also obviously collecting a lot of valuable phenotype data. And I think in the future, we'll have a lot of interesting variants to be able to submit to ClinGen. And so as the data coordinating center, we hope that we can help to facilitate that, because one of our roles is to make H3Africa data as fair, as shareable, and as accessible as possible. And so, we'd love to continue working with ClinGen. We've also developed a whole lot of tools, for example, a genotyping array, which also relies on us knowing, what are the clinical variants, that are of relevance to African populations, as well as other world populations. So, we use the data in ClinGen quite a lot in interpretation of a lot of the work that we do. So, it was very simple doing the submission because we got so much support from ClinGen, and we look forward to doing some more submissions in the future. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. So next we will move to Frederick Kakembo.
Hello. Good evening.
Hi.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So my name is Frederick Kakembo, and I'm based in Uganda, Kampala. And I have a bioinformatics background. I just finished my bioinformatics, and my bachelor was in biomedical laboratory technology. And with ClinGen, and then I got involved with ClinGen was in my final year project, MSc project. And I remember I was given a whole exome sequencing project, and I was tasked with finding predisposing variants for the breast cancer patients. And I was successful with the calling of variants because I knew the whole variant calling part of it. But then when I had a variant, I had a challenge of how do I interpret the variants. I asked my supervisor, and they didn't know how to go about the whole process. So I remember I was referred to the rare disease group that's in H3Africa. And last year, that's when I got to know about the workshop, this same workshop. And I talked about how you can get involved with ClinGen and how they can take you through the whole creation part. And I thought it was an opportunity for me to learn more and maybe to solve the challenge I had of how can I go about prioritizing all the variants I had. So I volunteered to be part of ClinGen. So I went through the training and all that, and then I was accepted into the hereditary cancer gene creation expert panel, which I took further training and finished that training. So I've been attending more of the ongoing trainings and attending the monthly calls. And for now, I could say the knowledge I've gained from it has greatly impacted me, because I know being in a society whereby human genetics is not something that is so common. Taking an instance at our university here, when you look for someone who can do, for example, just a curation of a human genome or a given variant, you might fail to find one, or you might find one or two. And being in a position whereby I can do all this, I feel like it has been a great push for me and a great learning experience for me. I can't say it has been entirely easy for me. It has been a bit of a learning process. But yeah, I've enjoyed the whole process. And if someone would ask me today if they would get involved, I would say, yeah, definitely. It's something you can get involved in, and I strongly encourage you to get involved. Because it's when you come to, for example, the variants and genes, there is more unknown than what is known. So getting more people who can do that curation and getting more unknown and solving the unknown, I think it's something we definitely should be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we will hear from Zane Lombard.
Thank you, Deb. Morning, afternoon, everybody. I'm Zane Lombard. I'm based at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm a medical scientist and associate professor there. And my involvement really with ClinGen and the GREGoR consortium is really linked through H3Africa. I am the PI of the Deciphering Developmental Disorders in Africa, or DDD Africa for short, project that Amanda has already told you a little bit about. And through that project and through our involvement with the Rare Diseases Working Group, we've really linked up with ClinGen and GREGoR and are looking at opportunities to collaborate and work together, but also to build capacity for doing this kind of research that we're doing through DDD Africa on the African continent. So the DDD Africa project has two objectives really. And the first is is more of an implementation objective to really look at establishing a proper and good service for diagnostics, for genetics and genomics in Africa. And the second, of course, is for discovery. So to learn more about the underlying genetic causes for some of these rare Mendelian disorders that we are seeing in our clinics. And we're doing this at the moment through two sites, one in South Africa and one in the DRC, which Ami Lumaka is heading up. And I think there are many opportunities there for us to learn from ClinGen and from the GREGoR consortium, but also possibly to work together in future. And as I said, in building capacity for doing this kind of research and expanding the African footprint and the contributions that we can make in that kind of way to these big consortium efforts. Thank you.
Great. All right. So now we can open it up to questions from our participants. So if you have any questions for our panelists, you can click to raise your hand. So if you think most Zoom versions will have reactions in the corner there, and then you can click that and then raise your hand, and then we can unmute if you have that, or you can also put some questions in the chat. So we have, just to make up some time, we have a little bit of time for questions within our panel, and then we'll open it up to questions from all of the speakers for today. So I will go ahead and take moderator privilege to ask a couple of questions here. You know, some of the feedback that we get in terms of contributing with ClinGen and with GREGoR involves as well consideration of, you know, the total commitment of time commitments within your own work, time commitments within the consortiums you're involved in, as well as time zones. So it's time zone issues in between calls, and as well at times language barriers in participation as well. So I would love to just get some thoughts from our panelists about overcoming some of these, or your experience as well, you know, with choosing activities, choosing involvement over time in your participation. So you can just feel free to chime in to answer.
Can I say something?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very valid point, and I remember it's something I had challenges with because I know about the time differences. Sometimes I had to attend meetings even at midnight and all that. But I think one good thing about the whole organization part of it is prior communication. So, for example, when I say we shall have a meeting next month even if you say it's at midnight, I kind of psychologically prepare myself to attend that meeting, though even if usually I'm asleep. But when I get a prior communication, I will set myself to attend that meeting at that time. And maybe also maintaining the meeting time. So for example, the monthly pause, when you say the monthly pause so it's 5 p.m. our time, I know even if I might have something that I might be involved in, but then if I now have a meeting to attend, let me say Friday at 5 p.m. and it's a constant meeting, I always have, I will get time to squeeze in some time to attend. So
That's great. Thank you.
Can I comment?
Sure, yes, please.
So, I mean, I do think that certainly, I think COVID and in part has sort of made us or forced us into this sort of thing of, you know, the day doesn't function in 8 to 5 slots, and obviously particularly when you're trying to interact across continents. So certainly the time zone can be to an advantage and a disadvantage. I think it does allow you to choose things so that you can fit in. I know that I've chosen my ClinGen participation out of my normal working hours to allow me to attend. I think sort of for maybe younger participants, it's about commitment. And I think that if you want to grow these things, you just have to find the time to do it. Just one little practical comment is we are not always aware of US time zone changes or time zone changes elsewhere. And so I've missed a good couple of meetings around summertime and wintertime changes. Maybe that's something practical that kind of you could alert people around, you know, the time zone changes when they happen.
Great, thank you. I wrote that down with 2 exclamation marks. That does catch us. And I think getting a bit more, you know, getting like more reminders, more notifications that the time zone is changing, and it changes at multiple different dates across the different groups that we are working with.
Yeah.
So we do have questions that I'm seeing here in the chat, and I want to make sure that we can get to those as well. So we have a question from Melissa on for African researchers who provide samples to GREGoR for sequencing, will they have access to the raw genomic data to perform cohort level discovery analysis in their disease areas of interest? And so so we can open this up as well, just for time's sake. I know we went a little bit over, so we'll open up questions to all of the speakers and panelists as well.
Yes, so absolutely. We view these as like it's your samples, your cohort you're providing, that you're working with the GREGoR network. And so we do, or the GREGoR consortium. So we do plan to give back the CRAM files or BAM files for the original sequencing data. And then also with the groups we work with and several of the other centers have systems sort of like Seeker that you can use, that you'll be able to have your cohort right there and be able to do analysis. So another reason to check out the Seeker workshop tomorrow. Thanks.
Great, and I see another in the chat here, which is great. Thank you for adding in the chat. Are there any specific criteria, clinical criteria, to submit samples to GREGoR for sequencing?
Yes, in terms of there has to be a strong suspicion for a Mendelian disorder. There has to be really deep, good phenotyping information. There's different, there's different centers working together, and there are some some sort of different focuses. Like we do a lot of neuromuscular disease, and the Broad Center and the different centers do have certain areas they're expert in. So actually going through the GREGoR contact form is a good way to make an inquiry if you have a specific cohort and are trying to get matched with a partner. And we're working on a more general inquiry system, but again, still getting everything up and running with the consortium. Thanks.
Great. All right, and we could also go back to our question earlier. I know I didn't have all of our panelists respond, as I was very excited to see questions coming up in the chat too. So if we have any additional responses here about the commitment, time zone, time zone issues as well.
Yes, I can comment.
Sure.
In terms of commitment to submission of data, I think that is very small because of the great support that the ClinGen creators provide. In terms of the panels, so I sit on many meetings that are after hours, and I think as long as for people who've got young families, it is not over dinner time, then actually it's quite convenient to not have a meeting in the day. You can just sort of sit on that meeting at 9 or 10 p.m. But the other way to get around this, and I'm sure that these have been considered, is to very quickly make the recording available, so people who weren't able to attend, they can sit and listen to the recording, and have online systems such that people can contribute even if they can't sit on the calls. So they can listen to the recording, there's discussions that are on an online document, they can contribute on that online document. So I think there are many ways to contribute out of your meeting time, because sometimes people find a little bit 5-10 minutes between other meetings where they want to come in and give input. So I think there are ways to get over it and then to get around it, but also some of the consortia that I'm on, they will choose one that's convenient for one time zone and then another the next meeting. So they alternate so that the meetings change times, but then people can at least attend every second meeting, for example.
Well, that's great. I think that the idea of making the recording quickly available and then perhaps even having some feedback mechanism for that as well. So what were your thoughts on this? So that the people are not just watching a recording, but they can also have that participation as well. That's great. So thank you for that. Okay, do we have any further questions? We have a little bit of time remaining. I do have questions in my back pocket, if not. Okay, so I will go ahead and ask another question that I have here. And this is just kind of, a little bit of a fun question that then we can transition on to our next section. So I did recently hear a saying that the conference call is as close as one can get to doing nothing in science. So I would love to hear our panelists' take on that, given that so much of our work does involve conference calls.
Maybe I can kick off by saying, I chuckled when I heard that question, but it is, I think we're all suffering from Zoom fatigue and have so many online meetings and conference going on. But I think it also hops back to what Nikki was mentioning before about how management around these meetings are so important. So if videos and action items and minutes are shared quickly, it might not be the most convenient time to do something during that actual conference call, but and people maybe zone out or multitask. But as soon as you have that little gap of time to do something, and there's a point of contact where you can kind of interact in a self-paced way, I think that would really help with contributions and helping people to engage in different ways and be a bit more beneficial to the larger group.
Great. Yeah, I can just add that I think, so actually, I mean, my whole life is conference calls right now from 8 till 5 or 6, and then I start my work. So actually those conference calls have to be effective. Otherwise, I've lost all my working time. So I think the main thing is to keep them as interactive as possible, to stop people getting distracted. It is so easy to get distracted and check your email. But if they're constantly, if you constantly engage everybody on the call and get feedback, I think you can actually achieve quite a lot. We've had to achieve a lot in 2 years. Maybe it started off, quite slowly, but we've had to learn that this is the way we achieve our work. This is the way we achieve our meetings and our interactions these days. So I think it's important to keep it interactive, keep it interesting, and as Zane said, follow up afterwards so that it's not time wasted, that it's discussion time for something to then happen offline, outside of those conference calls, if one ever has time outside a conference call.
True. And do we have any other additional responses on this? Oh, I do see another question in our chat as well. So I want to pay attention to those in our last couple of minutes here. So it says, do we have, okay, sorry, this is then I think for perhaps for the GREGoR consortium. So do you have any neonatal data sets that you are working with?
I will say the GREGoR consortium, as I said, we're just kind of getting started. We are building on the 10 years program of the Center for Mendelian Genomics. And there are neonatal cohorts, there's stillbirth cohorts. So there is a lot of really exciting data already in Anvil through under the CMG. But GREGoR is kind of an open book in terms of opportunities, and we look forward to working with all different kinds of cohorts.
Great. All right, do we have any further questions from, again, I had said you can click hand to, or the reactions to raise hand and ask questions, or put any questions you have in the chat as well. We have another question on whether the data sets are open access.
Open access would mean we could publish them wide on the web and anyone could see them. Like the only really open access data set I'm really aware of is 1,000 genomes. There probably are other data sets. These are controlled access, and that participants are saying it's fine for researchers to use them in research, but they don't want their things published like really openly on the internet. So that's the control. And then Anvil, when you apply in dbGaP, you put in what you want to do with the data, and then somebody checks to make sure it follows the consent form. So CMGs have various restrictions on what can be done with the data, because some are general research use, some are just for retinal disease, and so there's a lot of varied consent language. Under GREGoR, we're trying to really unify and have it be much more unified and general in what we can do with the data, so that it will be a lot more accessible, but not open.
Great. All right, thank you. So I see Amanda's hand is up. We can have a quick response there, and then, or a quick question, and then we will transition to our next speakers.
I actually just wanted to ask Anne a question about the phenotyping of the cohorts. So I know that I've looked at times at sort of some of the collaborative efforts and sort of what in the US is kind of called standard deep phenotyping, can obviously be very challenging to achieve in a low resource setting. And I just wonder whether you've sort of got some kind of balancing views on how much phenotyping you're prepared, or how little phenotyping perhaps you're prepared to accept at times, in order to sort of widen the access to the system.
So I agree that yes, like resources are different, and we do need to think a little, maybe a little creative in our approaches, working with different groups to increase inclusivity. I think it's like going to be a one-on-one conversation, and that is really one of the, like, it isn't just like you submit things on a form and like stuff happens. It's typically like you submit on a form. It seems like we look for there's some discussion to be had, and then we normally set up an hour call to really talk about the cohorts, the resources, the questions, the processes, and make sure everyone is on the same page. We, in general, for GREGoR, do like things to be pre-screened for known causes of disease, so asking for a prior gene panel, but we know in under-resourced communities where we're not able to get any genetic testing, that would be a crazy requirement to make, and so we do tend to be more flexible on that, but it's going to be a one-off, like an individualized discussion to think about that. We are going to need some clinical information, because we can't, like, if we don't know what we're looking for, we're not going to be able to do anything with the data. And it's really just making sure that some information is collected as much as is possible, and then making sure that data is shared with the consortium and with other researchers. We want to make this as open and collaborative and communicative a process as possible.
Great. All right, well, thank you so much. I want to thank all of our panelists and our speakers, and we will transition on to our next speaker. Thank you.